What is Stuja? What exactly is the ceiling of USA's 3x3 team? And how concerned are we about the Australian Opals, a roster with so much WNBA talent? Noa Dalzell of SB Nation is here to discuss what we've learned from 2/3 of the Olympic 5x5 group play and what we've made of USA in 3x3. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast, it starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. Hello. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Jackie Powell. I'm one of your hosts on this program. Typically on Fridays, I cover the New York Liberty at the Next, and I've covered women's basketball nationally at many other places. We want to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen each and every day. And remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by everyone at the Next, a place where we cover women's basketball all the time, and we tell the stories that need to be told every day. Subscribe now to support the staff at the Next and at Locked On Women's Basketball, who work so hard to bring you this coverage that matters oh so much. It is $9 a month or $72 per year. Find us at thenexthoops.com and subscribe. And remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Today's title sponsor is FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list. All right, dear listener, last time we were together, Jesse Morrison and I previewed all of the festivities that were about to go down at WNBA All-Star Weekend. Jesse was absolutely right about Alicia Gray winning big time during the skills contests. And then I was right to say that Arike Gumbawale was going to get her comeuppance once again against Team USA. But today, Noa and I are going to look at what we've seen across the 5-on-5 Olympic women's basketball, especially Team USA, and looking at those Australian Opals that really boost a lot of WNBA talent. And then we're also going to talk about USA's 3x3 team and why their performance maybe has or hasn't been what we've expected. So, Noa, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to start first with recapping what we saw yesterday afternoon, where USA took on Belgium, in which was clearly a road game for Team USA. So I think where I want to start is, I guess, what were your main takeaways from what the United States was able to do?
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me, Jackie. I think yesterday was actually a really fun game to watch, the U.S. versus Belgium match, because it felt like Belgium, for a team that's, obviously struggling right now record-wise in the Olympics, showed a whole lot of fight. And people that have watched Belgium play before, I don't think it's much of a surprise. Clearly a very talented team, but also defensively, like when they step the pressure up, you could tell that all of a sudden American superstars that very rarely look rattled looked pretty shaken at points during that game yesterday. But I think ultimately, like, it's really hard to see a pathway where the U.S. don't win, because between A'ja Wilson and Breanna Stewart, it just feels unfair to have them both share front court. It makes me think about if one day they teamed up with the WNBA, what that would do to the league. And it would probably be one of those moments that ruins sports. But ultimately, I think that's been the key. And then just the American depth is just so hard to combat, because every time it felt like maybe Belgium was making a run, they would just get fresh faces in there, and different people can step up and do different things. This roster doesn't really have any holes. So if it feels like the roster has holes, it's just, you just got to get a different combination out there, because there's just so many different things that you can do. So I thought yesterday's win was good, because you want to see them get tested before the actual, the single elimination games actually begin. And so you don't want to have like an easy pool play round where everything is a 30-point win, and then you get to the quarterfinals, and all of a sudden there's some adversity, and this group together hasn't faced that before. So I felt like there were moments yesterday where they had to kind of regroup, regather. All of a sudden a double-digit lead became 5 points in the second half, and there was always a response. So that's what really stood out to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, on the broadcast, LaChina Robinson continued to talk about how physical Belgium was. And even before the Olympics, there was a lot of talk about physicality in the WNBA, especially about certain rookies. And then the response was, well, hey, when you get to the Olympics and when you get to FIBA play, that physicality ratchets itself up,
Right.
because the calls on the floor are a lot less, or maybe they're just more fluid, And it was interesting to watch when the officials were calling all of these fouls in the favor of USA. The Belgians were like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Because they're used to not, drawing those calls. I mean, that was something that stood out to me. But I think what I want to ask you in particular is, what do you think was the turning point for Team USA throughout that stretch? I mean, it was very much so up and down, and they really didn't pull away until, I want to say, that final quarter.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think there was multiple moments where I was like, this is where they kind of won the game. But I think ultimately it was the fact that when they needed a bucket, they were able to get one from really Breanna Stewart. I think was the MVP yesterday. But both of them, just the rebounding disparity was huge. And there was a couple moments there where it's like Belgium was building some momentum, and then USA gets like four offensive chances. And so it's just demoralizing for a team that's trying to string together stops, that's playing good defense against some of the best players in the world, and then you're getting multiple opportunities. I think they almost out-rebounded them twice as much yesterday, and so that's devastating. And Breanna said it after the game on the broadcast, was like, our goal is to get multiple opportunities and for them to get one. And it's really hard to consistently beat a team when that's the case. So felt like there was a couple stretches there where it's like USA just got like 3 or 4 offensive rebounds, and it's backbreaking to experience that. And so that's what really stood out. I also felt like earlier on there was Alyssa Thomas was a turning point. Just her entry in the second quarter, it was a tie game after one. It could have been one of those back and forth games, and she gave them some life and some cushion and separation. And so I thought that was huge, just going into the second half. They never trailed from that point forward. They always had a little bit of a lead, even when it seemed like maybe this was going to be a close one.
I mean, that's a great point about AT, because I think when you think about physicality and someone who is just able to be physical and sort of punch back, I mean, that's Alyssa Thomas in a nutshell. And I think you just were able to have her. I mean, you saw her versatility right on display. The fact that she can guard anywhere. She can guard well on the perimeter, which that's where Cheryl Reeve had her. She can guard in the post on switches because she's just that strong. I mean, this essentially was why Cheryl Reeve made the call and was like, hey, I know you haven't been involved with USAB in a while, but we want you on this team because of your versatility and because this team is built around Asia and Stewie, who are 2 of the most versatile players in the world. 2 of the best, which we've all been saying, but they're also 2 of the most versatile. So it makes sense that you sort of have also very versatile players complementing them. And so before we go to our first break, I did just want to talk about Stuja, which you alluded to in the beginning here. We don't know where this nickname has come from. I think WNBA online circles are trying to figure out the proper name for these 2. Is it Stuja? Is it, I mean,
I think it's Stuja. It works.
yeah, Again, I don't know who made it up. I mean, I know I saw Emily Johnson, who is a content creator and a photographer, really talking about this. But Noah, I guess what is significant for you when it comes to this partnership, and maybe why it's unlike anything we've maybe seen even, in the NBA too?
Yeah, it's honestly unlike anything I've seen, and it's pretty remarkable to watch. It's one of those things, and I think this happens a lot with the Olympics, where you're watching a certain athlete or a certain sport, and you're kind of like, I'm in the golden age right now of that. Like I feel this way about women's gymnastics. Obviously, watching Simone Biles, or like you're just lucky to like be watching basketball, be watching sports at the same time that she's doing her thing, and watching the way that Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart have been able to play off of each other, I think has been so remarkable, because you often see, a guard and a big finding some chemistry, but these things take time too. But players that are kind of similar in their play style and play the same position, a lot of times, and I covered the NBA too, and you see that it becomes like, which one of us is going to be on the court, because we can't really play together, or who's the offense going to run through. And they have found a way to literally be just kind of, improving one another and building off of one another. And the two of them, building a front court together, it honestly feels unfair. I mean, it felt even more so against Japan because of just the height disparity. But even yesterday, it's like having one pass to the other, clean up each other's misses. Like it's ridiculous. And you can see that they've just bought into this notion that they're going to be a partnership and they're going to be a tandem. And I wouldn't be shocked if one day they're teammates in the WNBA later on in their careers. Like maybe that happens, and it's going to be one of those things that breaks basketball. But to date, right now, I think it's been one of the things that has made this USA team seem pretty invincible. Even at times yesterday where, they were in a close game against a good Belgium team that's given them some trouble before. It's just hard to imagine that duo is not going to be able to kind of take over late in games when they need them to. And so, yeah, it's been super fun to watch, especially for two competitors that have gone at each other in, last year's finals, that are competing in MVP races, that have obviously been kind of near at the top of the league for the last few years. So seeing them kind of join up and do this, it's hard to find parallels of this in basketball, male or female.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That being on the same WNBA team thing, that's interesting. I mean, the Aces Liberty rivalry would just be dead at that point.
Yeah.
But that is something for future versions of us to discuss. Coming up, we're going to talk about USA in 3x3. But first, I do want to tell you all about our good friends at eBay Motors. And so, eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins, just like Stuja, of course. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you, eBay Motors. Now I want to tell y'all all about apostrophe. So, imposter syndrome is such a thing, is it not? One of the biggest things that can lead to a lack of self-confidence is your skin. Acne breakouts, rosacea, wrinkles, these can all take a toll on your confidence level. And that's why we're really excited to partner with Apostrophe, one of the sponsors of this episode. So Apostrophe's goal is to help you feel confident in your own skin, whether you're dealing with breakouts, signs of aging, or acne scarring. Apostrophe will help you love the skin that you're in. So Apostrophe is an online platform that connects you with expert dermatology teams to get customized acne treatment for your unique skin. Through Apostrophe, you can get access to oral and topical medications that use clinically proven ingredients to help clear acne. Simply fill out an online consultation about your skin goals and your medical history. Then snap a few selfies, and a dermatology provider will create a customized treatment plan just for you. So, Apostrophe has been really helpful for me when it comes to helping me deal with my hormonal acne. Which usually comes up once a month. It makes sure that the bumps and blemishes that come up on my skin aren't painful and don't make such an impression on my face. Apostrophe helps with pimple size and decreases that redness. We have a special offer for our audience. Get your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/lockedon when you use our code LOCKEDON. That's a saving of $15. This code is only available to our listeners. To get started, just go to apostrophe.com/lockedon and click Get Started. Then use our code LOCKEDON to sign up, and you'll get your first visit for only $5. Thank you, Apostrophe. We very much so appreciate you and your services. And here we are. We are back. I am here with Noa Dalzell. And before we get into 3x3, just wanted to remind you all about Locked On Sports Today. It is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news. It's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, Noa, we're just going to get into it. Where exactly does USA's 3x3 team stand as of today, Friday, August 2nd?
So it actually matters that it's a 10 a.m. on Friday, August 2nd, because this team, it plays again in a couple of hours. So by the time this episode comes out, the record will be a little bit different. But right now, they have 2 wins and 3 losses. And they started with 3 losses. So they were 0-3. And it was pretty stunning, honestly. Even though this is not the same team that won gold 4 years ago or 3 years ago, this is still a team that nobody expected to be on the brink of elimination after 3 games. And then they won 2 in a row. And all you need to do in 3-on-3 is just get on a winning streak, because once you're on a winning streak, then you can get to the play-in round, get to medal in games, and anybody can take it from that point forward. So I'm happy to kind of explain how it works a little bit, just because I know this has not gotten as much mainstream attention, so it's a little bit confusing. But there's 8 teams that qualified for the Olympics, and then the top 6 after pool play, and I think everybody plays each team once. So the top 6 records move forward. So you can have a tough start. It gives you there's a little bit of a margin of error, whereas normally in the Olympics, like, you have your one day where you need to nail your routine or whatever it is. Like, here you actually do have a margin of error. And so the top 2 teams out of the 8 go right to the semifinals, and that's going to be played on Monday, I believe, and that's the same day as all the medal games and everything. So you want to be in the top 2, you're guaranteed to be in the semifinals. But then seeds 3 through 6 go to a play-in round. And they play one another, and the 2 winners that emerge from those 4 teams are the other 2 semifinals teams. So that's why even when USA had lost their first few games, if you win the next 4, which is what they're in the middle of doing right now, and if they keep the winning up, then the slow start won't really matter. Then they can get into the play-in, and then they can, then it's anybody's game, right? And so that's kind of how it's been so far. I mean, I think all 3 games that they lost, they were in until the very, the last minute. And the thing with USA, the thing with 3-on-3 basketball is that it's 10-minute games, right? And it's 10-minute games, 12-second shot clock. It goes so fast. It is nothing like regular, 5-on-5 basketball. And so a team that's 0-3, it's like having a bad game, effectively. It goes so quickly. It's just a couple bad minutes of basketball, and now you're eliminated from the Olympics. So I think it goes against what a lot of basketball players get used to, which is you can make mistakes and it's okay because it's a 40-minute game or a 48-minute game. With 3-on-3, it's like a couple bad plays and you're out. And so that's kind of what's happened to USA, is that it was those first few games, and it's all in a 1 week span, right? They had a couple bad games, and especially down the stretch, they just made some bad decisions, lost who they were guarding, took a bad shot on offense, and next thing you know, you're gone, right? And so I think with this 3-on-3 team, the players that are on it, it's Haley Van Lith, who this is her thing. She's been on 3-on-3 for a while. I think people that don't follow 3-on-3, which is most people, know her from college and everything that she's done there, and Louisville and LSU. And so people are kind of wondering, like, why is she on the 3-on-3 team? Like, she's a 3-on-3 player. That's been her background. It's been her resume. And last year she was on the World Cup team that won gold. And so she's not really supposed to be the problem. She hasn't had a great run so far. But she's kind of the main guard initiator on that team. Ryan Howard, who's obviously a great basketball player, is also on this team, but she doesn't have as much 3-on-3 experience, and that's shown so far. And it's little things like when you're playing help defense, like if you're on a court with 3 people, you can't overhelp, right? Because then somebody else is going to get open. Whereas in 5-on-5, there's more people to help out with that. So it's schematically an adjustment for players, and she's gotten burned a little bit in these first few games. And then Sierra Burdick is a player that plays overseas. And she's been like a fixture of USA 3-on-3, and she was also on the World Cup team that won gold last year. So people are kind of like, who's that? Where did she come from? She's a 3-on-3 player as well. And then Darica Hamby has been someone that was a replacement player for Cameron Brink. She's actually done a pretty good job for someone that was not supposed to be on this team a month ago. But that's the lineup, and it's been wild to watch because the men's team has been losing every game too. So it's kind of like, why is USA basketball, that is so dominant on the 5-on-5 side, like struggling so much in 3-on-3? Because it's really been a huge disparity between the two programs right now.
That is an excellent primer, and those are some really great points. I think what sticks out to me is when you're talking about Ryan Howard, who, and you were talking about Haley Van Lith, who has had many reps with 3x3. Ryan Howard was trying to make the 5-on-5 team, the senior national team. And so she didn't make it because of her age or whatever politics are at play, which we know there are. And essentially, my understanding of probably what happened here was, as we know, Tanisha Wright is one of the line coaches for the 5-on-5 team. Dan Padover, who is the GM of the Atlanta Dream, Tanisha Wright, head coach, obviously, he is on the selection committee for USA Basketball. So, it seemed as though Ryan was really close to making this team. So essentially, they wanted her to be an Olympian. They, Dan and Tanisha want their player to be an Olympian. You move her over. There's more spots to be an Olympian in women's basketball. But that caveat, which you brought up, is she really hasn't played a lot of 3x3. She went to one camp, I think, before the WNBA season started. And that was sort of when we knew, okay, if Ryan is getting invited to this camp, she probably won't be on 5x5 or 5-on-5 rather. And so that's a really interesting point. And also Ryan is coming off of an injury. She had some sort of ankle issue. I mean, I haven't been watching, but have you sort of seen her trying to find her legs a little?
Yeah, she hasn't looked like herself. And I've been seeing people that are just tuning in being like, who's this Ryan Howard girl? She sucks. And I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, this is obviously a basketball player that was the number 1 pick 2022 and has been a great WNBA player, right? So this is not a question of, is she good at basketball? This is a question of, did she have enough time to gel with these players and recover from injury? And so it only made it harder. Not only did the fact that they lost Cam Brink, but also now one of the other players wasn't able to fully partake in basketball activities up until just a couple weeks ago. So it's a tough situation for this team. And so I think while it's stunning in the sense that nobody expected them to be on the brink of elimination after 3 days, you can kind of figure out why they're in this spot, because they're going up against countries that are, their 3-on-3 teams are playing together like year round. They have years of experience. And so this is one of those things where it's like, you have to have, complete perfect chemistry with your teammates, more so than in 5-on-5, because the margin of error is so much smaller that you see a lot in Olympic basketball, someone throwing a pass to someone where they expect them to be, and then they kind of laugh it off because you can afford to do that a couple times a game because it's the Olympics and there is going to be that learning curve. You can't really do that as much in 3-on-3 because that's going to be the difference between a win and a loss. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right that this idea that 3-on-3 should get the leftover 5-on-5 players is part of why they're in this position. And it's not, it's not just it's not Ryan Howard's fault or necessarily just the Dreams, coaching staff's fault, but I think it's this reflection that right now there hasn't been investment in like a continuous 3-on-3 program. And you see, it kind of reminds me of like the men's FIBA side where they just put like on the last year, they didn't even medal. And you have so many NBA players that could have been on that team, but you can't just throw people together and think that they're going to go up against powerhouse teams that have been playing together for years, right? Like chemistry and continuity are so important. And so they could still turn this around. They won the last 2 games. If they win their next 2, they're in the play-in round, and then it's anybody's game at that point. And they definitely have enough talent and scoring and things, but they do have a little bit of a hill to overcome here.
Okay, so there is still hope for Team USA. Dearica Hamby has found a way to hold down the fort in place of Cameron Brink, although I bet, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, part of what makes Cameron Brink so brilliant for this is just her defensive anticipation. And when you have people over helping or just not communicating, she can just, save people.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about, like, I think the great defenders are the ones that are able to clean up people's mistakes that maybe the average viewer is not even aware that that's what's happening. And I think Cameron Brink is someone that on a 3-on-3 roster, not only offensively can she really bring a lot to the table, obviously, but defensively, I mean, there have been some really costly mistakes and there's nobody to kind of plug that gap and kind of overcorrect their teammates' errors. I think that everybody's making mistakes right now and there isn't that stopgap. And so she's really, really missing from this group. I think everybody knew that she was going to be really hard to replace, especially because you can't just pick any old player. They have to have a certain number of 3-on-3 points that accumulated too. So they have to have played in some tournaments. So that only makes it more difficult. But yeah, I do think this team probably wouldn't be in this position if it were, if she was healthy and she was able to compete.
Yeah, I mean, even with Ryan struggling, I'm sure Cam would have been a huge boon. So we're going to take another break, but coming up, we will discuss what lies ahead in 5-on-5, because there is one group that is really fascinating, which includes the Australian Opals, which has a boatload of WNBA players. So we're going to talk Opals after the break. But first, I want to talk to y'all all about our good friends at FanDuel. They are one of the sponsors for this episode. So I love sports, and I'm sure you all do too if you're listening to this. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I am in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Yes, thank you, FanDuel. We appreciate you. And we are back. So in segment 3, we're going to be previewing the end of this group play for 5-on-5. But I think where I really want to focus is Group B. And so the reason why Group B remains beyond interesting to me is because essentially this is the one group where you only have one of the teams that has clinched to go on to the quarterfinals. So for those of you who may not remember or know how this works in 5-on-5, and Noah previously described beautifully how it works on 3x3, How teams advance to the quarterfinals is in each group, there are three. The two top teams in each group, they automatically advance. So you've seen a bunch of teams clinch already. Serbia and Spain in Group A, they won their first two games, automatically on. Group C, where the United States is, USA and Germany both started out 2-0. They have moved on to the quarterfinals. So those groups are signed, sealed, delivered when it comes to who are the top two. And so outside of the top six, obviously you have the top two in Group B, you're then going to have two third-place teams who are essentially the wild cards who are going to make it to the quarters. And how that's decided upon is based on the win-loss record, and then you've got the point differential, which is exactly why Sabrina Ionescu took that 3 at the end on Thursday and shushed the crowd. It was because of the point differential. But anyway, so zooming in on Group B, France, the home country, is the only country that has clinched. They have won their first two games. The three other nations in this group, Nigeria, Australia, and Canada, are all jockeying for either that second spot or potentially a wild card spot. So I think we have to talk about the Australian Opals. And Noah, I guess I want to get your thoughts on sort of what you've seen, especially with a group that has, I want to say, maybe 5 WNBA players on roster. I will have to fact check that. But this is a team that has a lot of talent, and they come in third place right now. They are 1-1. They're third place in Group B, and they have the best team in the group left to play. So what really have you been seeing from Australia?
Yeah, I think we talked about this previously, but this is a roster that's loaded with talent, but that doesn't always mean that they're going to have the right pieces to mesh together to actually be a winning basketball team. And again, I didn't see this coming, so I'm not going to act like I saw the roster and I thought this was a roster that had major holes that was going to lose to Nigeria early on. Definitely didn't expect that, and I think that was probably the most exciting, surprising outcome so far during this early parts of the women's basketball Olympics. But yeah, you mentioned this, but it's a roster that's a little bit lopsided in its construction towards having more front court players. There's a couple of players on this team that are a little bit streaky, and that has come back to bite them a bit. So you just you have to have maybe one or two of those players. But one of the things that's notable about Olympic basketball is that these teams are so deep that you can kind of turn off of if there's someone that's struggling, you can kind of turn to somebody else. And I feel like Australia, there's been some individual struggles that have kind of spilled over. They're not out, so they have a chance. But yeah, certainly didn't expect them to be in this position at this point. But it sets us up for an exciting Sunday where I think Group B is going to kind of duke it out for the final standings here.
I'm not surprised that Nigeria has put themselves in this position because they are built on being athletic and really good defensively. But in the end, their offense is what is going to hold them back. And I truly believe that Australia is a team with one of the best coaches in the WNBA in Sandy Brondello, someone who is so used to having adversity and knowing exactly what buttons to push to try to get out of it. I think you also have to bring up the fact that Lauren Jackson is on this team. Lauren Jackson, one of the greatest players that has ever played this game, one of the greatest front court players ever. And so is Lauren Jackson going to get her game to shine? Is Australia going to make it? Will they play France well enough to get their point differential down? Those are the questions I have.
Yeah, they have a chance. That's the thing. You can. That's the kind of the fun thing about Olympic basketball is that you do have more of a margin of error than the other sports, right? That's kind of what the pool plays for. And I think you're absolutely right. Like Sandy Brondello is probably one of the best things they have on their side right now, because you just have to be able to respond to an early loss like the one that they suffered. And so, Canada plays Nigeria Sunday morning, and then Australia, France Sunday afternoon. I honestly don't have a good sense of where those games are going to go. I could see it going in many different directions. But I do think we're probably going to see it come down to a couple of points here, which is why you see, I don't think USA is really in position to worry about an extra 3-pointer down the stretch, but across the Olympics, you're seeing that these teams, it's completely different than regular basketball that we're used to watching, of how every point counts. And I think with Group B, it really might come into play, like some random basket that was made in a game where a team won by 12 could be the distinguisher here. So it's super exciting to watch. And you have so many big names on the Australia side. I think sometimes you get caught up in the names and it just seems like this team is going to have an easy pathway forward, especially when you look on the other side and you're like, I maybe recognize a couple of these names or not at all. But that's what makes basketball so fun, I think, is it being hard to predict and the big names not necessarily winning you basketball games, especially when players haven't been able to play together year round, and maybe other teams have had more of that continuity. And I think this Australian team, they have a lot of WNBA players, which also means that they've been playing WNBA basketball up until a few weeks ago. So there's that trade-off, right? There's a lot of talent on that side, but they've also been playing with their respective teams and haven't been with this program all year.
Absolutely. And I did fact check, and there are 6 WNBA players on the Opals. You could actually say 8 if you were to count Lauren Jackson's previous WNBA experience and Kayla George's previous WNBA experience. But the point is, there's a lot of WNBA experience on the Opals. But anyway, thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no off-season in the NBA and in women's basketball too. But Locked On NBA provides daily pro men's basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. And I want to give a huge shout out to Noa for hopping on the show today. Noa, where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can find all my WNBA coverage at sbnation.com/WNBA. So yeah, full-time there. So I'll have regular daily coverage and then also longer features and soon to be potentially a daily newsletter. So lots of stuff coming out of that. So I would check that out.
Ooh, we got a tease. I love a tease. Anyway, this has been Jackie Powell and
Noa Dalzell.
And we are signing off. Have a great weekend, everyone.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.